Hello everyone, wishing everyone strength this evening. The video is coming out later than usual, but it has some very interesting information. For example, about the fact that men liable for military service will most likely really stop being accepted in Europe. Then we'll take a look at what's going on with energy in Ukraine. And they're saying that there might be blackouts again. Not in winter, but right now. And we'll look at why exactly, and a lot of other interesting things as well. So watch the video all the way to the end, I highly recommend it, and of course subscribe to this wonderful channel. And to start, let's take a look. There's a minister here, a former minister of foreign affairs, his name is Kuleba, the owner of shovel handles, which as he said, Ukrainians are ready to fight with on the front lines. But Kuleba himself never made it to the front, nor to Cherenkov. But he did end up with a woman named Svetlana Paveletsko. She is his wife now. He helped her open her own library. A businessman, a talented person, talented in everything, specifically sex shops in the center of Kyiv. And this very Svetlana Paveletsko regularly interviews Kuleba. He interviews her. That's the kind of journalism they have. Strange, interesting, well, apparently an entertaining activity. What's my point? That it's usually Svetlana Paveletsko who, for some reason, is interviewed by Kuleba himself. And once she stated that if Ukrainians are cold in winter, this was when the infrastructure was being destroyed, they can just surround themselves with goods from her store. There are heated products there, so you can warm yourself up, and she was even giggling while saying this. That was, of course, just real life. Now Kuleba is interviewing Paveletsko. They've switched roles. It's some kind of game they have, apparently. And she once again says some interesting things that if, to put it briefly, you hit Kiev with a nuclear bomb, hit the decision-making centers, then that's a victory. Kuleba remains silent. I don't know if it's approving, disapproving, or if he just doesn't care at all, but I think you'll find it interesting to listen to all of this.
There are also some valuable,
the latest ones. Also, let me remind you, this Paveletsko isn't a journalist. I don't know why they're interviewing each other. If Kuleba, well, he has specialized training, he has some specialized knowledge, but what Paveletsko can say is absolutely impossible to understand.
And in general, the tools they can use. If it is used, the likelihood that they will strike decision-making centers, as they say, is not that high. And if it comes to that, it will mean that we have almost won.
He says the likelihood of a strike on decision-making centers is low, but if it comes to that, it means it's a victory for us. Well, not quite, but almost.
He wants to kill someone in a fight. They use nukes to save themselves, not to finish off someone else, right?
Well, I don't even know about saving themselves during the war with Japan. What did the US do? They dropped Fat Man. And with the second bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they weren't saving themselves. They wanted to speed up the process of signing peace agreements. Where did Paveletsko get such an interesting conclusion that if you hit someone with a nuke, you're saving yourself? Well, maybe it goes along with the concept of national security in some countries. That if suddenly someone threatens the national security of a country, then in that case we'll strike. But not now, later. The whole world will be in ruins. And she liked this concept so much that she licked her lips. So basically, if Ukraine is destroyed with nuclear weapons, that's considered a victory. Like, if Zelensky apparently pulls this off and Kyiv gets hit with a nuclear weapon, then that's a victory. So, if anything, you know who to turn to. The consultant on Paveletsko's case, I think, doesn't charge much, and she can advise on any political issue. Moreover, she can also advise on how to use all sorts of different tools. As you know, a talented person is talented in everything. Well, okay, Kyiv and nuclear stuff is one thing. Of course it's strange, but let's put this conversation aside for now because nothing is clear yet. It's clear that nothing is clear. But what is known is that Ukrainian men liable for military service will most likely, though it's not certain yet, start being denied temporary protection. Let me reassure you right away, it's not everyone, not all of them, but only those who arrive after a certain period of time. And that's exactly what we'll talk about now, about this period of time. The media reports that the European Commission is proposing to extend temporary protection for Ukrainians until March 2028, while at the same time introducing restrictions for newly arrived men liable for military service. Most likely it will come into full force after it is approved by the Council of the European Union and officially published in the official journal of the EU. And also, probably in the official journal of official publications in the official journal of the EU. It's like a journal above all journals. This was reported to us in Brussels by an unnamed official, some mysterious, apparently powerful person who was quoted. According to this anonymous source, further consideration depends on the EU member states, which are most likely interested in making this decision, and after coordination. It usually takes about 20 days before the official announcement, after which the regulation comes into force. Earlier, it was reported that EU countries plan to support the extension of temporary protection with restrictions for those liable for military service. This was done, as it was explained to us, so that Ukrainians would stay in their homeland and go to fight at the front. They say that since Ukraine is the bulletproof vest of Europe, it is like a steel porcupine with its needles pointed toward Russia. And this hybrid, this militarized organism is supposed to fight against Russia, protecting Europe whether it wants to or not. Europe doesn't really care about that. Does this matter to the people who are actually on the front lines directly fighting, unlike all these talkers who just say, "We're at war now, I'll show you one of them too"? These are rhetorical questions. I'm sure the answer is no. And write in the comments what you think about this, whether you're a soldier on the front lines or not. But I'd especially like to hear the opinions of the military. So, did we actually set out to defend Europe? I've already mentioned a couple of times what was the original concept anyway. To defend our own country, our own families. They still say that we need to defend ourselves from some abstract barriers. But that can still be understood. But as for defending Europe, you die, you lose your business. Because if you go to war, you end up getting pennies after all sorts of deductions, to all sorts of commanders, to patriotically minded commanders, to all sorts of fighters and others. And are you ready to lose everything just to defend Europe? That, of course, is also a very interesting question. Maybe the Ministry of Rhetorical Questions can answer that, but there are some questions here, and they're not small ones. Nevertheless, we're told the following. The text of the decision is not worded as if it only concerns men. It's worded neutrally and concerns individuals who are subject to military obligations under Ukrainian law. Why was this done? Obviously, so there wouldn't be any accusations of gender imbalance during the defense. So, the law probably says that those who are subject to military duty in their home country are not eligible for temporary protection. Who is subject to military duty in their home country? Well, mostly, of course, men. So here it's like killing 7 with one blow, like it's written in old fairy tales. Well, it's pretty much the same thing. And it seems like they've upheld and preserved those European values, and they can avoid letting in military personnel. Men subject to military service assigned to guard someone somewhere. Everything is just perfect in this world. Simple. It is emphasized that the restrictions will not apply to those Ukrainians who have already received temporary protection in European Union countries. It will continue to be extended even to those subject to military service. Exceptions may apply to individuals with military obligations who are already under this status. The following is stated. We are already discussing this issue with the Ukrainian authorities to ensure the most objective and fair verification mechanism possible. Indeed, if a person was allowed to leave, for example, for just a week on a business trip and then applies for temporary protection by the very fact of such an application, he is essentially violating the legality of his departure from Ukraine. Well, and obviously the officials are very concerned that someone is going somewhere. This bothers them, and even some so-called liberals, like, well, today I listened to an interview, it was wild. There was this little guy, Fegan. I don't know where the stress goes in that name, but this person said that there's no way out, mobilization is mandatory. So, a person who is basically not allowed to enter Russia, who would obviously be taken for his little white hands if he goes there, is telling others who are in a similar situation, just under different circumstances, that, well, you have no other choice, you have to go fight, that's how it is. But can you imagine the cynicism is off the charts? Just all these so-called patriots from completely different countries who, on the one hand, say but on the other hand, they say the same cruel things. It's just brutal. There are already countries that are ready right now not to accept anyone. Denmark, for instance, is leading, as some Ukrainians say, even ahead of their own fathers in hell, and is now stopping the granting of residence permits for Ukrainian men subject to mobilization. This group reportedly can't get a residence permit in Denmark anymore, as stated on the ministry's website, showing ministries can handle this. Видите, вполне они могут делать, что хотят. And the following is stated: Denmark firmly supports Ukraine in its fight for freedom. Therefore, we are making changes to the special law on Ukraine because our rules for granting residence permits are not intended to be used to avoid mobilization. Ukrainian Defense Forces. This undermines Ukraine's military efforts and weakens its ability to defend itself against Russian military attacks. It would be interesting to know who was that official. The Minister for Immigration, Martin Betskov, stated it would be interesting to ask this very minister, when this very law on refugees on temporary protection was being formed, did it in any way relate to men, to women, to children? Of course not. It was about universal human values and protection for everyone, because if a person is a person, then there can't be any exceptions. If you have a law on temporary protection, it should protect everyone who falls under this law. But here we start right behind the scenes, taking actions, and with a serious face explaining that supposedly these people are not equal, while those ones are more equal. It's like in that old joke when it's hard to get rid of racism just by changing words, which are supposed to help everyone. But in the end, there won't be white, yellow, black, red, or any others. There will just be green, and that's it. I want you to stand in a single line, and they go on telling stories about how there will be green ones, and that's it. About how, so that you are in order with that. In such a state, such universal human values are realized. And then, well, words like, for those who, let's do this now, those who are less green, pale green, step forward, and those who are dark green, stay in the back. Well, and so, in general, everything naturally fell apart, so here it's pretty much the same thing. Then what else do they tell us? They say that temporary protection will indeed be extended, maybe even until 2027 or 2028, but of course not for men aged 23 to 60, so that's how things are with these European leaders. Write in the comments what you think about this. As for Ukraine itself, there could be problems in just a few weeks. That's because the heat is coming. For many people, the heat is already such that you can't manage without an air conditioner, and I already showed this today on the Science channel. By the way, if you're tired of politics, be sure to check out my Science channel. Here, I'll show it to you now. It's called Americans But on the Moon, and it's just wonderful because, well, it's the music I listen to. And there's information about everything there. There are news digests. For example, the latest video is actually dedicated to summer. There is pure scientific information, and there is also a fight against obscurantism, like with contactees, flat earthers, and other such Anunnaki. So subscribe, I think it will be interesting. Now, about the heat. There are videos here where they fry bacon and eggs without any fire at all. No smoke, no flames, basically some kind of magic. So let's see how this can be done. This is France, where right now it's about 43 or 45 degrees in the shade outside. And now the Frenchman takes out the bacon.
If the bacon is going to work, then the bacon should be here in full sun and in the shade. Let's go, bacon.
I was watching closely, by the way. It really does sizzle in the pan. There are signs of liquid boiling there. So it's all true. The only thing that's unclear, of course, is that you could stage something like this to get more views. You can heat the pan on the stove, put it outside the window, and then fry the bacon. I'm considering that option. But it could also be that a black pan really does heat up to about 80 degrees, give or take, and that's why you can fry bacon on it afterwards. Of course, I doubt that any liquid would actually boil. You still need 100 degrees for that, but in general, here it's already...
It heats up, see? It heats up just fine. I even added a small egg to get my little rain in English, just as it should be.
Well, in general, the denaturation of egg protein happens at a temperature from about 60, I think, even up to 70, so everything is fine here. I still have doubts about the liquid boiling here. So, what's my point? Because the heat is coming naturally, everyone wants to escape the heat using air conditioners, fans, and other things, other tools. They're not energy saving at all, and naturally people keep turning on more and more of them. In addition, some nuclear power plants in Europe, at least in France, have started to shut down because they can't cool the coolant to the required temperatures. Well, in general, there's an expert who tells us that Ukrainians should expect power outages lasting up to 5 hours a day in the near future. This was stated by energy expert Stanislav Ignatiev, and he said the following: 3 days ago, we entered an irreversible phase of the summer. The specialist says that these are systemic restrictions for both industrial and residential consumers. He adds that the recent outages on the left bank of Kyiv happened precisely because of increased consumption and network overload. During the hot period, outages will mostly happen in the evening, that is, when people come home from work for those who still have jobs, and then suddenly the power goes out. He says the most difficult situation will occur in the evening. When solar power plants stop working, Ukrainians come home and turn on air conditioners en masse, which leads to a critical shortage. But here again, all we can do is applaud those who replace nuclear and thermal power plants with these solar ones. It's great when solar panels are installed in places where there are about 300 sunny days a year, maybe 250, but in Ukraine it's a bit different. For example, in Spain, yes, everything works and the energy is stored somewhere, but in Ukraine, the miracle is a bit smaller. Naturally, clouds appear, there's no sunlight, it's dark, and there's no electricity. If the darkness lasts for a long time, people use more and stronger electrical appliances, but the energy companies don't sound the alarm. And so what happens is what happens. Next, he says that most likely there will be possible power outages, especially since the energy infrastructure hasn't been restored since winter, so that's how things are. And now what? Now I suggest we take a look at some powerful leaders, and I spotted one right away. Here, as they say, in Ukraine it's better, or maybe it's better at home. And here is one character who suddenly for some reason is speaking Russian, some kind of betrayal. Another combat pastry. He is asked whether those who flee the country should be stripped of their citizenship. And let's listen to what the combat pastry has to say.
I think every person should be at war.
All men should be aware and should take some part in the war. What do you think?
Some kind of participation in the war should be taken by Horielku, says Pirozhok. Some strange journalist, if that's a journalist, and that guy is kind of strange too. Who? Why? There are more and more of them. Where are they coming from? Turn off the lights. They're drawn to the light.
He speaks in Russian. He speaks in Russian. Speaks in Russian.
I think she's asleep or she just woke up. What's going on?
This one is asleep.
Everyone is asleep.
That will be very negative in the future. And in the future, I would fully support the government revoking their citizenship, even up to that point.
But there are two things here. The first is that it's unclear why, if this is a TV channel, there is a violation of the Ukrainian law requiring the use of Ukrainian is being violated all over the place. That's the first thing. And this guy is speaking Russian. And the second thing is that, again, he should at least read under what conditions citizenship can be revoked. It's impossible. For several years now, many men abroad would be extremely happy if they could get rid of that citizenship. Even those in Ukraine would be very happy to give up their Ukrainian citizenship. These threats are like, well, scaring a tomcat with a sausage or a female cat in heat. I mean, it all looks pretty strange. And the frightened Ukrainians are just running around not knowing what to do to keep their citizenship. But the wannabe tough guys obviously have received their instructions. And it says there, with a stern, serious face, be sure to threaten Ukrainians so that they get scared, or else they might lose their citizenship. Oh my God.
An entry into the country if, well, when the war ends, they might decide to come back, and they simply banned entry into the country.
By the way, I've already made a video about entering the country. And what will happen in the country after all these hundreds of thousands of such combatants? Well, no, real soldiers and officers are coming back. But these kinds of wannabe tough guys will start demanding special attention in stores, in political organizations, in public organizations. They'll cut in line, wave their weapons around, of course they will, and this will be banditry even worse than in the 1920s of the 20th century. And I don't think anyone would want to come back under those conditions. It would be worse than in the 90s, pretty much at the same level of lawlessness as the 20s. So just stay there yourself, make your own money, keep earning for yourself. If the economy holds up and after the war, if other countries don't support it, then just live there and pay taxes, that's fine. Maybe they'll even raise that levy. But if men stop coming back to Ukraine and no one returns at all, then the 18 million who stayed in the country won't be able to keep the economy afloat. It will simply sink. How can you make a kettlebell float? It won't float, it'll sink right away. Just off the pier and straight down with bubbles. Well, it's clear, people like that aren't used to thinking. They were trained that way from the start. Most of those who became these so-called tough guy warriors were originally used to drinking beer near apartment entrances or stores. And then, well, when you get lucky and social mobility lifts you up like that, and you're floating on the surface of the water, we remember, right? If it doesn't sink in water, you can't fool us with the packaging. Then you start giving long-winded speeches in the only language you know, and not even very well. And you start telling others how they should live and what they should do. And on top of that, you keep messing up, excuse my language, at every step because you don't know the laws of your own country, nor public sentiment abroad or in Ukraine. You keep rambling on, but it's like the saying goes, keep yapping while your turn lasts. On that note, let me finish. Goodbye, everyone.
Now, here's another important video. Around 200,000 servicemen have left their units without authorization since the beginning of the full-scale war.
For us, that officially means 800,000 people. No, 250. 250. 250, okay.